Hi, I'm Kyle from New Gamer Nation. I'm here today with Sven. He is the creative director of Divinity Original Sin 2 and the founder of Larian Studios. And we're looking at Divinity Original Sin 2 here at PAX East. This is the first time that it's been shown to the public.
Yeah,
it was actually
that's correct.
Kickstarted just a little bit ago. You made the goal within 12 hours.
Yeah.
So a lot of demand for the game. And I just got to get my hands on it, and there's like a lot of new systems there. There was already a lot to play around with in the first.
That's correct. There's really a lot of stuff that has been added. We have, you can play with 4 players now, or up to 4 players I have to say. You can play cooperatively, but also competitively. We've changed a little bit the way that the action point system works, so that it's more tactical. We added source skills, which allow you to do all kinds of cool things, but you have to figure out how to get those source points that activate those source skills. We have lots of little systems that are being added. Your origins are important. You can play as different races, so there's really a truckload of stuff that's being done on it.
Let's talk about the origins for a little bit, because in the original Divinity, you roll with your 2 characters and you can pick up some companions along the way.
So the way that it works in Original Sin 2 is at the beginning of the game, you're going to select one main character. You're going to do select class, well, it's classes, you'll select your stats, your looks, but then you can select race and origin story, and your origin story is going to give you a very different experience depending on which one you take, because pretty much every single dialogue in the game has been written such that it reacts to the origin stories, and it reacts to your race and also to your previous deeds. And so as you play that, it becomes very special, because once you switch to from party member to party member, you see that the world reacts differently.
So if you're choosing one original character, and then from there, if you're playing with a co-op partner, they would choose one as well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then you're picking up 2 companions, same as before, and do they have origin stories as well?
Yeah, because in the beginning of the game, so after you picked your character, and if you're playing in single player, let's say that you're playing in single player, all the other origin stories that you didn't pick up are going to be jailed together with you in a place called Fort Joy. And you have to pick which ones are going to be your escapees, so you'll take them with you, and that will be the ones that you'll journey with. And so that could be also obviously a human player.
Okay, so that's your party for the whole game then from that point on? Okay, great. So you mentioned competitive, and when you were showing the demo to me, you kind of screwed over one of the other characters, one of my characters I might add, in a quest, and sent them to jail. I think that's a really interesting dimension, because it's not something you see a lot. And it kind of like harkens back to like actual Dungeons and Dragons, where you can kind of get deeper into the role playing.
That's the entire idea, of course, and we're trying to make a game that simulates that role-play, pen and paper or tabletop experience on a computer. That's why we have the split screens, while we have the online that you can play together with friends, and why we have so many systems in there. So that literally is the idea.
I mean, that's got to be like incredibly difficult to do, right? There's got to be so many different ways that things could play out.
Well, we just had quite a session in which we had to like start abusing. My entire presentation went awry because we did one thing differently, but we found a way to get out of the problems that we were in, and that's the cool part, that you can do it. It's difficult, it's a lot of work, but we are building this on top of the Original Sin Enhanced Edition engine, which basically means that we already have 3 years of development on RPG systems behind us, and now we're going to add a couple of more years of development on top of that, so we have a very powerful RPG system that we can work with, and that makes it possible.
Can you talk a little bit about the story of what's going on in Original Sin 2? Because you mentioned that you're sorcerers in this, right? And you were source hunters in the first game.
Exactly. So you're going to be on the run in the beginning of the game from divine magisters who want to purge you. They want to take your source skills away. And source is a very powerful form of magic, so you immediately from the get-go have access to incredible powerful magic, but it requires sacrifice, and it can be all kinds of sacrifice that you're going to be doing. So you can consume bodies, you can consume spirits, or you can go and pray, and you can sacrifice some of yourself. Basically, that's the setup of the story. And then obviously, there will be, but I can't spoil it from there on.
I noticed that the original game, one of the things I like about it never takes itself too seriously. Both in terms of what happens, it can get pretty dumb, but in terms of like the writing also, I mean, you talk to the animals and stuff like that. And this looks like you can talk to ghosts, so I can see how that could potentially be interesting.
Well, it's a little bit more grounded now, so it is a little bit more consistent, and things is a little bit more serious. There's still a lot of humor in there. You can still talk to animals. It's actually depending on what race you are, and you're going to talk to animals, you'll see big differences. If you have spirit talk to talk to spirits, and you have pet pal to talk to animals, then you can talk to dead animals. So that's in there as part of the system now.
Great, yeah.
So there's really a lot of stuff that's been added on. But the overall narrative is much stronger, I think, because we tripled this writing team that's working on it. And the reason why we wanted to make it more grounded is because we have these different origin stories. And the only way that it really works is if you actually really care about your characters and not just make them like plastic dolls that you're fooling around with.
Does it make it difficult to write a narrative that really like has emotional beats in it and arcs that are not emergent when there's so many possibilities for emergent storytelling on the part of the player?
So, the way that it works is that there's this entire list of tags that are being tracked, and depending on those tags, you saw that the dialogue was different if you talked with one character or another character. Right. That goes throughout the entire game, and suddenly then it all works. And the cool part is that if you, for instance, have the racial tag that you're an elf and I'm a lizard, I polymorph you into a dwarf, then suddenly everybody's going to talk to you as if you're a dwarf, because that level of depth is present in the game.
Was it a no-brainer to go back to Kickstarter again for this project? Or?
It was not a no-brainer, because initially we actually had doubts about returning, because we thought like, okay, if you go there, you suck away money from other projects if you're a successful project, a very big successful project. Then it was Brian Fargo actually that convinced us. He said, no, that's not true. If you have a very successful restaurant and you have restaurants around it, people will try out the other restaurants, and that was the point. So if we do a shout-out for a project that is not that well known and there's a lot of people backing us, then they'll go have a look at it, and that actually works. From there on, it made a lot of sense for us to do it, because that was actually the only objection that we had, because the advantages for us are clear. We can make our game bigger and better, and we have all that community feedback.
I'm very much looking forward to playing the game.
All right, great.
When do you think that we could expect it? I know you're just getting started right now, but what's like long-term?
Okay, I mean, our track record is so bad in release dates that anything I say now will be a lie, so I'm not even going to try.
Don't worry, I'll hold it against you. So.
We'll try to make it as good as possible, and then when it's finished, then we'll release it.
That's all I can ask for. So thank you so much for your time, Sven. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Have a good one.